Calibration is super important, whether you are in cold approach, so in open places like this, or whether you are in a sales meeting and you just want to get the best results with your client. So that's what I want to share in this video. So let's say that you are just walking where I am right now. You want to have the ability to calibrate to your surroundings to make sure that when you are here, people kind of like understand what you're doing and that they're not too shocked by what you're doing, that they're in acceptance of what you're doing. That is important because if you don't have that, people will have a negative experience by definition of you, right? Because then they're not in acceptance, then they maybe are a bit shocked by your behavior. So that's why it's important that you want to calibrate to your surroundings, all right? Now, on the other hand, I also want to explore why you can't over-calibrate either. So you need to be, you need to give yourself the space to do what is important to you, not necessarily to your environment, all right? Because if you want to meet someone, maybe the environment, or maybe not everyone in the environment likes that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should let that hold you back, right? It's the same thing in a sales call. When you are like one-on-one with your prospect, you want to, but generally when you have the conversation, you want to make sure that he's kind of like has a good feeling about things. He's kind of like in acceptance of what you do. But then also on the other hand, you don't want to go so far. You don't want to go so far with it that you can never go against what the prospect wants. Because sometimes you're going to have to go against what they want, right? If they have a certain belief that is damaging to them, they're not necessarily going to want to be challenged. Some people will, and some people have a good mindset about that. But even the people that have a good mindset about that, they don't necessarily like that, right? Because being challenged by definition means there's going to be some type of confrontation there. And some people are more in acceptance of that than others. But my point remains that you don't want to over-calibrate to your surroundings. Whether that's, whether you're out here, whether you are in sales calls with your prospects or with your clients, you want to make sure that you calibrate, that you can, that people are in acceptance of your behavior, that they understand your behavior. But at the same time, you want to have like enough room to express yourself in the way that you want, and enough room to give yourself enough room and enough freedom to do what you want, right? But that's important. That's why I'm stressing that calibration is important, because there are some people, especially back in the day with all the cold approach, freedom challenges and social anxiety challenges, people who just do like whatever, like scream in public or do whatever the fuck, do push-up in public. And I think that's fine to an extent, but like you don't want to shock your environment, right? And that's the problem with people that go too much into the freedom things, because you want to have freedom, but not necessarily at the cost of everyone around you, right? So that's that's important, and that's why things like calibration is very important, and all of it is like very nuanced, right? It's never like the answer is never yes or no completely. It's always a very nuanced thing, and you always grow your understanding depending on the level that you're at. But also, you can look up to other people. Maybe you can look up to me in some areas, in some aspects where I maybe have more experience. Probably you have other areas where you have much more experience than me. But this is an area where I really thought a lot about. So probably hopefully that's giving you some useful advice. Both in cold approach and in sales. I have a lot more experience with cold approach than with sales, but and that plays either way, right? So that's what I say. And with cold approach, it's like I don't necessarily have the results that I want with cold approach, because I feel like it's almost been like a struggle to me, a struggle that I learned a lot from. And I am not necessarily, I think it's also an exercise for me to not be annoyed with that, because sometimes I just want to see results, and I think just the way I am, I'm not someone that experiences results quickly. I think just because I tend to make things like more challenging, and maybe it's also just the fact that I am a slow learner. Maybe I am just not talented, and maybe I just need more time and more discipline and things like that. So I do kind of see lots of areas that I'm practicing as more of a struggle. On the one hand, because that's my experience, but on the other hand, I'm also trying to let go of that and like accepting the fact that, I actually not 100%, but I actually kind of want it to be a struggle, because if you don't struggle, if you were to get results without struggle, then that to me feels more like luck than real growth. Maybe you just have a good strategy, but if you didn't have to struggle for the strategy, then, is it really growth? I think that's also something you can wonder about, at least I wonder about, because on the one hand, you don't want to be pulled towards struggle, because you actually want to avoid it. You want to find situations where you can be more efficient, where you can do things in less time, do things better. And that necessarily means that you eliminate parts of the struggle, right? But then on the other hand, if you're just trying to get quick results and you don't struggle, then you're never really building a real skill set. So that's something that's a very nuanced thing also to think about, that I think a lot about. But yeah, that was this video about calibration. Hello. That was a video about calibration, that you want to calibrate to your environment, and then on the other hand, you also want to calibrate to your environment on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you also want to wow, that was pretty cool. Trying to cold approach here the entire day, and then this happens. That's pretty amazing. I forgot what I was saying, guys, but yeah, calibration, it's an important thing. Good things happen eventually, and see you guys around. Cheers.